This is the second of my two exam review screencasts. Sorry I got cut off the last time, but we'll pick up where we left off. And we were looking at population, since we discussed in part one the physical geography characteristics. So we'll talk a little bit about population, and we were discussing population distribution and population density. And remember that we'll talk about density in terms of arithmetic density, the most common way that it's calculated. But in the section on South Asia, we also talked about physiologic density as a second way to measure. And then, of course, population change. And India is on a much faster population growth rate than is China at this point. So India will be surpassing China as the most populous country in the world within the coming decades. And we also want to be sure to talk a little bit about some of the different characteristics of population in the world. And we'll start by looking at religion. And of course, the realms that we've been covering give us a nice diversity of different religions, and also include two of the longest continuous civilizations on Earth in India and China, and also great cultural hearths, the cultural hearth of the Indus River Valley, and what you'll see on this distribution of world religions is the presence of Islam in yellow. So, of course, Islam dominating through the Middle East and also into Pakistan and Bangladesh. Keep in mind that the partition of India was designed around religious lines, with those two countries being designated as Islamic countries, with Hinduism dominating in India. In red, you'll notice Buddhism, and Buddhism dominates throughout mainland Southeast Asia, and then you'll see pockets of it in places like Bhutan and Sri Lanka. This is another religion that began in South Asia and extends through East Asia, although we'll see a decidedly different flavor of Buddhism mixing with Confucianism and Taoism in East Asia and into Japan. And then we'll see some pockets of Christianity, notably in the Philippines in Southeast Asia. And the unaffiliated is sort of interesting. You do have a lot of Buddhism that's practiced in Vietnam, but then this was a communist country, and so the non-religion of that's espoused through communism is reflected in this this non-affiliation. And again, Buddhism dominating, Islam dominating in insular Southeast Asia, with both Indonesia and Malaysia being predominantly Islamic countries. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about wealth and different population, different characteristics of income around the world. And so what we're going to see in this, we'll back out into the global view, and of course most of us are well aware that the United States and most of Western Europe are high-income countries, as is Australia and New Zealand. Remember, when we're talking about Australia and New Zealand, you've got a little bit of an unusual circumstance in that they rank as a high-income country, but are an anomaly in the sense that they don't have the modern knowledge economy that you find in the United States and Europe. You don't find a strong manufacturing base. This is more a reflection of relatively small population that controls most of the resources and is predominantly a agricultural and export-oriented economy around livestock products, minerals, and so forth, many of those going to feed the economies of East Asia and Southeast Asia. And so this is a little bit of a problem when we start to look at the future of these countries in this increasingly globalized economy. Again, a useful picture here for us to view the United States, the high economy of the United States, high income economy, and we cross the Pacific, and of course we see Japan and South Korea fitting in with that higher economic value. Of course, a lot of trans-Pacific economic exchange. We're seeing a lot of economic exchange between East Asia and Southeast Asia, East Asia and Australia, especially with resources traveling northward from Australia and New Zealand, agricultural and livestock products, as I said, and then finished products, manufactured goods, traveling southward, and to a certain degree, migration and population, as well as migrants coming out of Southeast Asia, Indonesia and the Philippines, for example, traveling southward to take advantage of the high-income economies of Australia and New Zealand in a pattern that is not unlike what we see in the United States, with Middle America and Mexico moving northward. Of course, the fact that they do not actually share the same landmass represents a significant difference. And of course, one of the overarching characteristics of Australia and New Zealand is their extreme isolation from the rest of the world in terms of distances between places. As we zoom in to these areas, we'll see, and it really depends on the source of the data that you're looking at. Generally speaking, China has a wealthier economy than does India, and we could look at, for example, the population. They're giving us the per capita wealth as, let's see, $19,000 in China in this particular source, $10,000. So it is lower, but it just happens the way that they're grouping the countries, keeping in mind that China has industrialized very rapidly, that we've seen this tremendous migration from the rural interior to the coastal cities, and these include the special economic zones. Let's see if I can get our view here so we can look at. Okay, so here we go. So along the coast we'll see places like Shenzhen, certainly fitting into that category, Shanghai. These are the great economic engines that integrate China's economy with the world economy, and population has always been concentrated in these coastal areas, but now we've seen this tremendous migration from the interior rural areas into these zones of economic interest. As we come off of the recently agreed upon climate change agreement coming out of Paris this last weekend, one of the concerns is not just the fact that China is the largest carbon dioxide producer in the world. There's actually hope that China is going to be cleaning up its air quality as it's gained wealth and it recognizes the health problems generated by its use of coal. But a big concern is as India begins to rise and trying to bring many of its people out of poverty and into electrification, providing electricity to the rural poor, that this will be a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions as we move into the future. Again, I want to return to this. Some of these layers are not drawing as well. I'm going to go back to the wealth distribution again. And it shows an interesting pattern if you look at Southeast Asia. Again, be careful about overgeneralizing, but what you'll notice here is that you see Nepal and Bangladesh in East Asia being a lower tier And if we get into Southeast Asia, we see Burma, Cambodia, and Laos in particular. And it's a little hard to discern here, but Vietnam is actually considerably higher income. Oh, that one actually doesn't even show an income value, but Cambodia, Laos, and Burma or Myanmar are particularly low income economies. You see as a middle tier within the region, Thailand and the Philippines. You see Malaysia as a higher income economy. Singapore is actually a very high income economy, as is Brunei, so two micro-states. And then again, Indonesia, with a very large population, is kind of a middle tier. I think that number puts us pretty close to the per capita income of China. Again, you can see Malaysia considerably higher, as they have been much more of a player in the high-tech economy. And again, there are different ways that we can look at this data. So there's different way to slice it, but the results will show similar. I'll let that one draw. It's coming up a little slowly. And again, here's your kind of general classification of wealth per person. Again, common measure of the economic well-being. But remember, there are other things that we can look at here as well. Things like the level of infrastructure, things like life expectancy, income level, literacy rates. Those are all measures of development that we can consider when we're evaluating the nature of a particular country. Again, that particular layer doesn't seem to want to draw for me, but this is one I found rather interesting, and again, a little bit of a different way of slicing the information. But one of the things that becomes apparent here is that when you talk about hunger, with the red being the hungriest countries in the world, that India and indeed South Asia in general is very high in the level of the hunger index. Malnourishment, lack of adequate food supplies, lack of reliable food supplies is a major concern throughout South Asia. And by contrast, you see, in spite of their massive population size, that China is relatively well-fed, that you don't have nearly the degree of hunger in that country. Part of it is agricultural efficiency, part of it is the capacity of the land to grow food. Mongolia, kind of an interesting case where you see them ranking lower, actually in this map showing them as low as North Korea, which is, of course, among the most isolated and poor countries in the world, although the information out of North Korea is notoriously unreliable. If we go into Southeast Asia, we'll see, again, Cambodia and Laos being the two that rank the highest in the poverty index, the hunger index, which is a reflection of poverty. Interesting that if we zoom in, we can see East Timor, one of the newest nations in the world, showing an extremely high hunger index. Keep in mind that as you're looking at maps like this, it's always important to look at the source of the information. One of the things that we do within GIS is examine the source of where our data comes from. Okay, so we're running out of time here, so I'll just kind of zoom us into sort of a more general view of the realm, the major rivers across the realm that have played such an important role through history, and the interaction among these different populations through time. Traveling down into the great realm of Wallacea, Alfred Russel Wallace's region of biogeography, and the unique environments of Australia and New Zealand. Have a good day.